So welcome everyone to UW Claire's Faculty Staff Forum. Today we are partnering with the College of Business and we will have two presentations. So each presentation will be about 15 minutes long and there will be 5 minutes for questions after each one. And so to our online viewers, I want to welcome you as well. And also let you know that you can submit your questions using the Q&A function, and our wonderful graduate assistant, Matt, will read those aloud for us. And I do want to just ask our speakers, if we have questions from the audience here, if you could just give a short summary of the question for the benefit of the online viewers, because the microphones don't always pick up those. So my name is Erica Benson. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. And I am delighted to introduce our first speaker today. Dr. Sarbottam Bhagat is an Assistant Professor of Information Systems and Analytics in the College of Business at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and he earned his PhD in Business. And so please give a warm welcome to Dr. Bhagat.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you to UWEC College of Business and ORSP for giving me this platform to talk about my research. And thank you everyone who are here and who are online who has joined me to listen to my presentation. So the title of my research, the one that I'm going to be presenting, is called Cybersecurity Awareness and Adaptive Responses, exploring the impact of prior exposure on behavior. So this is the paper that is currently under review. I worked on this paper along with my co-author from UNT, Dr. Praveen. The whole motivation of this study emanated back when I was still a doctoral student. I participated in this informal discussions with a bunch of college students. And the conclusion of the discussion came on about most students are desensitized to the online platform. They just say yes, they just say, I agree to whatever platforms they visit. They are not cognizant about where their data is going, right? And I don't blame them. The hasty nature of the technological platform, it makes them be that way, right? So that got me thinking, maybe this is an isolated event confined to the section that I was teaching, right? Or maybe it is a university-wide phenomenon, right? So I went on about researching this, identifying the true cause of this. And then I collected data from UNT students, and UNT at the time had about 34,000 students. So I collected data from about 800 students. The results were pretty surprising. Students do not learn from their mistakes. And I don't blame them, again, because most of the students are naive. They don't understand the repercussions of doing something online, right? So that got me thinking, and then I resorted to philosophy, right? Seeing where does the learning come from? And it all boiled down to two different things. One, from social cognitive theory, so structured learning, structured education fosters learning, that is pretty obvious. The other one is people learn from experience. So we're looking at experiential learning theory, right? So then I thought about those two theories in the landscape of cybersecurity. And I just wanted to map things out to see if that is actually able to explain the phenomenon of people not caring as much about their online behavior, right? So the problem with the online landscape, the technological landscape, is that there is this brand new sexy technology that comes out every day. And we are immediately inclined to use that technology, right? Think about what happened when ChatGPT came out. We started supplying everything to it. People have started using ChatGPT as their counselor, right? Their relationship advisors, giving away all the personal details about their everyday life without even knowing how ChatGPT overlords, so to speak, use it, right? And the students are doing the same thing with their researches, right? They copy and paste their entire research in ChatGPT and hoping to refine it. Should they be doing it? Right. So the whole idea is there's this problem, new technology every day, and our mental models, they are built in such a way that we are not able to encapsulate the idea about the risk associated with using that technology. And what that does is it makes us, all the individuals alike, prone to being victim of different cyber attacks, knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes we don't even know that our data is being sold to some XYZ company. It is just the landscape of it, right? There's nothing we can do yet. So to counter this, many different organizations, including universities, different industry enterprises, what they have done is introduce this formal cybersecurity awareness program. We have that, right? We have that. So the idea is when we develop a cybersecurity program based on a structured approach and using this incident briefing approach, right? Hey, we had a breach last night, so lesson learned kind of deal, right? We use those kind of modalities to elicit some kind of proper cyber hygiene from people, right? But if you look at the statistics, to what extent do these awareness campaigns or these briefings contribute to actual cyber adaptive behavior, right? So a couple of months back, I heard this news about Experian data breach, which is ironic because Experian folks are supposed to safeguard all the personal details. So there must have been one employee there who clicked this phishing email, right? And then that started the whole chain. So now that begs the question, right? If the companies like those who are supposed to be gatekeepers of our data, I'm pretty sure they have a proper cybersecurity education program in place. If breaches like those happen there, then it must be quite a widespread phenomenon. So again, to what extent do these prior exposures, either through structured learning or experiential learning, contribute to changes in action, everyday action? That is exactly what we are trying to answer through this study. Just to reiterate, right, what factors contribute to this adaptive cybersecurity practices? And we'll get to the meaning of adaptive cybersecurity behavior in a minute. So basically, what we are trying to model is the effect of prior training, structured training, prior negative cybersecurity incidents, and how it shapes their evolving attitude, and use that attitude towards reshaping their everyday cyber hygiene. So now what is cyber adaptive behavior? Right, so I'm going to start with a very simple example here. So how many times we have walked out of our offices without locking our Windows computer? So how many times we have exited our classroom without signing out from our podium computers? And we have all received cybersecurity training, right? How many times we have written our passwords on our Notes app on the phone that is not password protected? So again, these are some of the examples of how unaware we are, and we are not even aware that we are unaware. So again, the definition of adaptive cybersecurity behavior has been taken from a long-standing psychological discipline, right? Psychology discipline. So what it tells us is the cybersecurity landscape is always evolving. There's going to be new threat every day, but what do we do about it in an adaptive sense, right? How do we adjust our behavior so that we become secure every day in terms of maintaining our cyber hygiene? That is basically what adaptive behavior in cybersecurity is. It includes common basic examples like using strong, unique password, using multi-factor authentication, updating your apps on your phone, including the operating systems, right? Using firewalls, antivirus software, updating it, and when you're traveling, using VPNs, right? Stuff like that. The resources that organizations spend huge money on for us to use, I won't say free, in an adaptive way, right? But how often do we connect to Walmart Wi-Fi in a nonchalant way? The whole goal of cyber adaptive behavior is to allow people to adjust their behaviors so that they can stand out, they can protect themselves from perps that are on the internet. In order to establish the research model, what we did was use this knowledge, attitude, behavior framework. It is very common in the psychology literature. So what it basically says is once when you are knowledgeable, you change to shift your attitude towards that particular knowledge in a favorable or unfavorable way, depending on the context, and then you will adjust your behavior accordingly. So if you want to predict a person's behavior, look at the person's knowledge and their attitude, right? And then you can predict the person's behavior. That is what KAB model pretty much says. So what we did was expanded this knowledge, attitude, behavior model with 3 constructs and added a few more contextual constructs, right? So we added prior cybersecurity training, prior cybersecurity negative incidents, their cybersecurity awareness, their overall attitude towards the education, and their adaptive behavior emanating from all those constructs. And this is our research model. So we've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different hypotheses going on, all trying to predict to what extent people demonstrate adaptive behavior. And then we controlled for some common control variables, just in case if there was any confounding variable, confounding nature of the explanation going on. I used a quantitative online survey, and most of the, two measurement items for two different constructs were taken from the existing literature, because why not? The other three, prior training, incidence, and adaptive behavior, they were developed solely for the study. The items for these constructs were measured using Likert scale on a 5-point. And since we had 3 different items that we developed, we performed a pilot study to test the efficacy of those constructs, just to see if they were measuring what we said they would measure. And all of them checked out. So of course, survey data, collecting data from people, IRB approval, I think. So again, I wanted to explain this phenomenon, not only being confined to University of North Texas at the time I was a grad student. And again, I didn't want to confine the study within the US for the purpose of generalizability, right? So I went outside the scope and collected data from the UK, India, Australia, and Canada, just to see if this phenomenon is as spread out as it was in the case of college students, right? So the recruitment platform that I used was MTurk. And then we collected about 1,310 samples. And after doing all the data grubbing, cleanup, I was left with 1,297 usable samples. And it allowed me to do a few statistical stuff with the data, such as k-fold cross-validation, splitting the data into 2 different categories, one for testing the measurement items, and then the other for testing the structural model. And here's the demographics, if you care about stuff like that. So one thing that I would have you note is the age groups, I think they are uniformly distributed, more so. The gender-wise, they are uniformly distributed. This one right here was not as surprising at first, right? But most of the people there have some kind of college degree. This is going to be important once when I show you the findings. The whole idea of testing the model, the kind of model that I showed you is using causal modeling approach, and then I use smart PLS software using partial least square structural equation modeling technique. And then I use the 2-step analysis. So first, from the 1,297 data, about 50% was used to test the measurement model. And then the other half was used to test the structural model, right? Making the most of the sample size that I had. And I also tested for the common method bias. And I used 2 different methods, single construct variation method. There was no common method bias, bottom line, right? So here's the table demonstrating the construct reliability and convergent validity. What you're looking at is the name of the construct and how they rate on Cronbach's alpha. Anything that is ideally above 80% is considered good. And the average variance extracted, anything above 0.5, if you're being stringent about it, is considered good. Right? So the measurement model test, it checked out. I also tested for discriminant validity, largely because I had 2 different constructs that we developed, just for the sake of that, and reviewers kind of like that as well. So again, all the different items that you see on the diagonal cells, they are the square root of average variance extracted that you saw in the previous table. And I just took the square root of them. So the idea is if this number is higher than all the different numbers underneath that table, then you're good. So here's the moment of truth. Right. So as expected, for 50% of the part, all the hypotheses came out significant, right? So again, prior cybersecurity training, of course, it is supposed to enhance awareness. Otherwise, businesses would not be pouring so much money on those trainings, right? And also, of course, when you have proper training, then we kind of tend to look at those training in a positive tone, right? And again, when you are trained, you sort of do accordingly, at least in the short run. Then you forget about it and you stop doing it. Right? So this one is pretty much straightforward, right? It is, it sort of lives up to the assumption, but this part right here does not. All right, so prior incidents, prior negative incidents, such as being hacked or breached or your identity being stolen, did not seem to have any effect on their awareness, meaning they didn't learn from it. They did not have this remorse saying that, had I taken this cybersec education, I would not have fallen victim to it. So maybe I should correct my behavior. So that was not significant. And needless to say, prior incidents didn't have any effect on adaptive behavior. Right. So it was surprising. Again, this is going to be the regurgitation of what I just said. And this is going to be the key part here. Right. So prior incidents didn't have any effect on awareness. In fact, overall learning didn't happen. What contributions are we looking at from the study? Right. So this is one of the first few studies to actually model adaptive behavior in the context of cybersecurity till date. This study clearly mentions that those businesses that focus on experiential learning in terms of their cybersec education, such as incidental briefing, one of those teachable moments, right? It is not going to live up to the expectation. People are still going to forget about it because people have become desensitized, right? We also advanced the knowledge, attitude, behavior framework by adding 3 different contextual variables and using it in the context of cybersecurity, right? So the stripped down version of our model would be a KAB model, and KAB model is not substantial enough to explain a phenomenon like this, right? So it sort of combines 2 different sources of learning. So now the implications of it. So it kind of makes us want to think what businesses think about those teachable moments, right? The kind of way the cybersecurity educations have been structured with teachable moments as examples, right? Harry had a breach last year. What do we learn from this as a scenario in one of those training programs? That is not going to work. Again, similar to that, post-incident briefings, it's already too late by then, right? And again, there's always going to be a group of people who are going to be at a higher level of risk than the others, like students, for example, right? The clerks, for example, at a business, right? They always fail to understand the bigger picture for why the businesses exist. And they are just there to get their hourly paycheck, right? They don't care about the big things by large. So the other implication is that formal cybersecurity training is essential with appropriate fine-tuning. Right? Incidents alone do not drive change. It is evident, right? What we need is a comprehensive, all-rounder cybersecurity education that is tailored to at-risk people versus not so much at-risk people. So it's all about embedding the culture of cybersecurity within the day-to-day practice, right? And it has to start from the top management. So now on to the limitations. So as you see, most of the data is self-reported. So there's a whole set of problems that we open ourselves to. So maybe using some kind of qualitative study and so combining that with archival data, right, is probably going to position our findings in a more pervasive way, right? Next thing to consider is some organizational factors, right, like culture, for example. Maybe one business organization is better in terms of cybersecurity education and eliciting adaptive response than some other organization, right? So what is the difference? Maybe the culture it is. That's it.
Our next speaker is Dr. Charlie Ebert. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Marketing and Supply Chain Management here at UW-Eau Claire. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Ebert.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And fantastic talk. I'm excited to give mine. And thank you all. Thank you all for coming. This is, it's always nice to be able to talk about research. This one is one of the ones that I found particularly fun. So I'll jump into it really quick. This is corporate reputation and public belief formation and evaluation of arguments for past events. Catchy title, working on a shorter one, but it's at the very early stages. I gave the talk at Colorado State University when I was in my postdoc there, and it was at its very, very early stages. Now it's not at its very, very early stages, it's at its very early stages. So very preliminary. Please feel free to, tell me what you think about it, shoot it down, say it's great, do whatever you want. But yeah, so it came up when I was doing my fun reading. So just my reading for fun, and I was reading C.B. and McCullough's Justifying Historical Descriptions. So, and if any of you are choosing a book for fun reading, I don't know if you're doing Game of Thrones or Harry Potter for my generation, but I would suggest this one. It's a page turner. It's really riveting. But it's a philosopher of history. He talks about basically what are the things that historians look at to try and justify whether they think things happened in the past. That's kind of the idea. And it's a pretty interesting read. He goes through different types, like statistical types and like analogy types. But long story short, it's a long book. It's hundreds of pages long. This is the gold standard. Generally, what they do is they do an abductive form of reasoning called inference to the best explanation. And it's a form of reasoning that looks at what's called theoretical virtues. So to get our minds around the theoretical virtues, I'm going to try and imagine a court case. It's a good way of thinking about the example. So imagine you got a suspect, there's a crime the person may or may not have committed, and you're trying to make an argument for this person actually doing it. So the first theoretical virtue that you might have in some proposal that they did it is explanatory scope. Does them doing it, them actually committing the crime, explain more evidence or less evidence, right, compared to other hypotheses? So if it turns out that, supposing this suspect is the actual criminal, explains 10 pieces of evidence, that's not as good as saying that it explains like 75 pieces of evidence, right? So that's one. The other one is explanatory power. That's comparing to other hypotheses, what is the strength of support? So a good example of this would be if you find out that the suspect's blood type is the same as was at the crime, right? Very, very incriminating, but it's not as incriminating as if you find out that their DNA is the same as what's found at the crime scene, right? Much stronger. Still one piece of evidence, but much, much stronger. And that's kind of a degree of support description there. You have disconfirmation. Disconfirmation is where the hypothesis would predict something or suggest something, but it's not there. So maybe if the person was the criminal, you would expect the blood there to have their blood type, but it doesn't, or the DNA to match, and it doesn't. And then finally got plausibility. So plausibility is the degree to which the hypothesis itself is supported by other facts. So maybe this person has a criminal record already, or they look suspicious. Probably shouldn't evaluate based on that, but supporting evidence, things like that. And then finally, you have ad hocness. Ad hocness is the weirdest one. That one is basically kind of simplicity. So if you got two theories, one of them requires 15 things to go right for it to be correct, and the other one requires 2 things to go right for it to be correct. The one with 15 things is just generally considered to be less probable because just so much could go wrong, right? So those are kind of the theoretical virtues for why you might think something happened in the past. And then what you do is you evaluate them and you say, well, hypothesis 1 is like better than hypothesis 2 through 7 on every single virtue by a long shot. And when you've got that, then you can say, okay, then this is the one that we're justified in thinking actually happened. Okay? That's the idea. And yeah, it's a form of abductive reasoning. So the big question is, what does this have to do with marketing? And so that was my fun reading, and I was thinking about marketing. I was doing my reading. I was thinking about marketing. I was like, well, this might actually have something to do with marketing. And I have 4 kind of examples to kind of prompt our thinking in this way. First, you might think that consumers care about the truth. Right? You might think that consumers, like if you ask them, like, do you really care about knowing regarding your favorite celebrity or the business that you are loyal to or the political party that you're motivated by? Or do you really care whether or not like they actually did something in the past? And there's a whole domain on transformative consumer research that is all about figuring out how to improve consumers' well-being, right? So maybe this is relevant. Maybe this is something that you would want to know. So then, if this is the gold standard in terms of how you're supposed to reason for research, if we respect the historical practitioners and what they do, then maybe we should see if our consumers, lay consumers, use this type of reasoning. And if they don't, then we should maybe see if we can help them pursue this type of reasoning. At the same time, companies might really care about it. So you look at the 2 in the middle, those are kind of the 2 sides of a coin, reputational risk or reputational benefit. If I'm a company and all of a sudden I'm accused that something happened in the past that's really bad, well, I don't want to be accused of that. And if it's really good, then I do want to be accused of that, right? So like, how do I convince people that I'm actually the one that did or did not do the good or bad thing? And again, you would want to look at this type of reasoning, maybe, if the consumers do think in this way, or if they don't, I'm not really sure. And then the final one is in terms of some organizations, particularly religious organizations, they are really heavily committed to the belief of something happening in the past, right? They care a lot, and their entire membership is based on people that hold strongly to whether something did happen in the past. So you would think that they would have a very strong inclination to care about this type of reasoning as well, particularly for their members, for recruitment, retention, things of that nature. Okay, so that might be what it has to do with marketing. All right, so what's the first step? So I go through the literature and I'm like, okay, so who's looked at the idea of corporate reputation or the idea of signaling for beliefs about the past. Not a huge literature on trying to figure out why people believe things happened in the past or not. And certainly nothing that I could find that talks about whether they are influenced by the abductive reasoning that is the gold standard in philosophy of history. So not a lot. So there's an opportunity there. There's something that could be done. I actually gave this book. So yeah,
It's actually very good.
oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Not a problem. So, okay. So how does this apply? So what's the first step? And my first step, there's different methods you could do. The method that I chose is the one that I know, which is doing experiments. And the idea was to just create an experiment where we manipulate all the different theoretical virtues and we see, do the consumers actually believe, more once you manipulate them. So it's kind of a straightforward approach where it's like different, like you have very, very specific virtues. You just manipulate them very straightforwardly. So I was like, this is kind of a nice starting experiment. Maybe I could get some students to do it. So I actually did. These are two students that we have. That's Maddie and Beth, and I did get their permission to send this picture out. So that's good. But they went to the National Research Conference at Penn like 3 weeks ago or something, and they actually presented this research. So that's kind of cool. And we brought them in and we said, okay, so let's create some hypotheses. So Maddie, Beth, and I created these hypotheses. It was basically just all the virtues work is our hypothesis for every single one. Power, if you increase power, it increases believability, scope, plausibility, disconfirmation, and hotness. So kind of straightforward, kind of like you might say yeah, it'll work. But it hadn't been done yet, so we said we'll do it. All right, so then we got into the design. So this is actually a tricky one to design. It's a mixed method approach. Well, mixed design study. It's going to be within and across subjects. So it's a 6 condition involving first your baseline belief in something, and then your belief after influencing the scope, the power, the plausibility, the disconfirmation, and the ad hocness. And then by 2. And by 2 is whether the favored cause is one of 2 causes. So if you're going to give an experiment where you say here's one cause, this cause, we're going to try and make you believe it more over another cause, it might be a good idea to reverse it and see if you can do the same thing with the other cause as well. So we had 2 causes where we favored blue versus lead, and I'll tell you what the differences are between those 2 in just a second. We took undergraduate students from a university in the Midwest. Don't know what university that would be for the reviewers. And then we had a baseline condition. So a lot of text, don't have to read this text, but the idea is that 10 people in Lindale County reported some stuff, the headaches, muscle soreness, problems. And there were 2 potential causes. One cause was the flu, seasonal flu that was going around. And the second one was minor lead poisoning that was created by Clothing Inc., a company that created clothing that had potential metal inside of its material, like bangles and jangles and things like that. And it basically would potentially cause minor lead poisoning. Now, this is not medically accurate, and we did put a disclaimer at the end telling people do not go with anything that we're saying. But we basically said, all this stuff is basically saying that the potential causes are mutually exclusive and exhaustive. There's no other potential causes. They can't both be there at the same time, and either everything is explained by one or the other. So that's kind of all that stuff. So we gave them this base case. We said this is what might be happening in Lindale County. What do you think? Do you think that it was lead? Do you think that it was the flu? Go ahead and tell me your answer, because, okay, negative is definitely not. 100 is definitely yes. And we let them give their best guess on that. Then after that, sequentially, one at a time, we gave them additional information. And the new information that we gave them manipulated each of the theoretical virtues: scope, power, ad hocness, plausibility, and all this other stuff. So for example, for scope, it says, upon further research, the investigative team has discovered that individuals with the sickness are also experiencing abdominal discomfort. Abdominal discomfort is a common symptom of this season's flu and is not a common symptom of minor lead poisoning. So you can see you add one more explanatory scope to one and not to the other one. And then we flipped it, obviously, for the other condition. And then over here, we have, upon further research, it has been discovered that 90% of individuals with the season's flu have the symptoms that we already told you about, whereas only 50% of individuals with minor lead poisoning typically show the symptoms of the soreness. So creating a difference in power. So this one is strongly supporting flu, whereas it's only like 50% supports the other one. All right, so that's power. Then we did the same thing for plausibility, ad hocness, and all that other stuff. And if you want to see, you can, but trying to keep it to 14 minutes. I'm going to keep going. All right, so that's for you if you want to review it later. It's actually in further slides at the end of this presentation. So then we asked them again, what do you think? Do you think that it was the cause or do you think it wasn't the cause? Now that you've had this additional information, and then they gave their answers. So now we've got the base rate, we got the change. And then we created a table. So you have the table of the summary, this is the average, and then the standard deviation, pretty high standard deviations actually. But the way it goes, you got belief. This is the kind of idea of whether you believe the flu was the cause or whether you believe lead was the cause. And then where it says flu here versus lead here, flu up here basically means that that was the condition where all the arguments supported flu. And here is all the arguments where everything supported lead. So what you can see, if you go through it, people started off here believing in the base case that flu was like 22 out of negative 100 to 100, and they thought that lead was like 7.5. So they had starting off, flu was probably the cause over lead, but not by much. Then after one argument in favor of flu for power, that went straight up to 60, and this went down to negative 35. And then we had the same thing happen for scope, plausibility, disconfirmation, and ad hocness. And you can see this stays around negative 40s, 30s, something like that, and this stays around 60s, although ad hocness is pretty low. Then for the lead case, we do the exact opposite, right? So we start off again, flu has an advantage, 25 to 11. And then we gave them arguments in favor of lead, and we go straight to 60s, and we go, except for ad hocness, which is again is low. And then we go to, this gets negative, goes around the negative 30s or something like that. Not so bad, not as bad as this one, as you can see, but yeah, definitely lower. And if you look at the change from 25 to there, you can see it's actually commensurate. Okay, good. So all of this is actually just significant. Like there's no reason to all of this, every increase from here to here and here to here and here to here is significant. And then on this next page, if you look at these are the statistics. We did mixed ANOVAs for each one between and within subjects for whether you were given the flu as the argument or you were given the lead argument, and then base, we did marginal belief. So you go for your belief after you give an argument for power minus your base. So that, and then based on whether or not you have flu or lead as your cause. General point is that everything was very significant. So you can see everything is below 0.05. And then for the argument themselves, you get a very significant, very, very significant result. So what do we find? We find all arguments, power, scope, plausibility, disconfirmation, ad hocness, worked in raising the marginal belief in the favored cause, and all arguments worked by increasing the belief in the favored cause and reducing belief in other causes at the same time. As a general point also to note here, the favored cause was still a difference. For some reason, there was still a difference between, like if you were in the favored cause was lead versus flu, you would see there's a difference between those conditions. But that's just kind of an aside. Okay, so some more exploratory stuff. That was our hypotheses. We hypothesized that, we saw it, then we said, let's see what else we can look into. We found that in terms of effectiveness, scope, plausibility, and disconfirmation were about just as good as each other. Less than that was power, and less than that was ad hocness. And then finally, there's some evidence of an underdog asymmetry, which is the idea that if you start off as an underdog and then all of a sudden you get some evidence that flips everything, it's like, oh, wow, actually, they might not be the case. So very surprising. Then it actually increases it more than if you already think that it is the case. And then you get more evidence that just piles on, if that makes sense. So kind of some evidence of an underdog asymmetry, but that really only happened for, what was it, power and scope. So not too much. Next steps. We could theoretically motivate the exploratory findings and do some further studies. I think that's an idea. We are actually currently exploring that idea. I'm working with a colleague over in England, and we're going to be developing some more studies based off of this. Slightly more related to probability theory. We're going to use Bayes' theorem and try and apply the virtues to Bayes' theorem in a really interesting way, hopefully. I could read more fun books in my free time and just scrap this and do something else. Yeah. And then, or maybe there's some fruitful ideas that come out of this talk and change the world. I don't know. Like there's the world's our oyster. So yeah, that's it. So thank you so much.
We have a few minutes for questions, so.
For either, if you want to.
Mark those at either of our speakers. Right, Tim.
Very interesting. Can you go back to that slide that had your conclusion?
Yes.
And
Yes.
two questions. First of all, so each subject was exposed to one of these, right? Not the sequence.
No, so we wanted to create, we didn't want to work on our budget of $0. So what we did is we actually created a within and across subjects. So our experimental structure is 2 by cause, whether you were given lead arguments or flu arguments. And then students were given the base case, and then they were given an additional argument, and the arguments were randomized, whether you were given power first, scope first, whatever. And then we said, subsequently after that, this is one of the reasons why it's a preliminary study. We said, please only consider the base case plus the new piece of evidence. Don't consider the previous evidence that we just gave you. So we told them to ignore everything except for the base case and the new piece of evidence. So that was the argument. Yeah.
But so they got them, but you randomized the order.
Randomize the order. Yeah. Power first, go first, all that.
Back to the conclusions.
Yeah.
That number 3,
This one.
yeah, it seems like it would be hard to.
Yep.
Control for the magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Yeah.
the manipulation.
Yeah, good. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's impossible. It's not. This is one of the reasons why. So I actually just recently submitted this, and I didn't even include this because I don't think it's a valid conclusion. I think that it is the case that this was different, but these are apples and oranges, right? Like a change in power. You know, we actually did 2 things when we changed power. We changed, like we put the percentage for the flu at 90, we put the percentage for lead at like 50. Whereas with scope, we added 1 new piece of evidence. How do you compare adding 1 new piece of evidence to a change in that? So we actually had no idea. So like, even though I did these exploratory results and we found this, it's not going to be relevant for a particular point, but it is interesting at least. You know, maybe there's something to think about here, something to talk about here. Yeah. This works. The arguments like these work. So the argument that the arguments increase belief, I think those are valid enough. But comparing across virtues is really hard to do with this type of experimental design. And that's one thing we realized, which is why I said in the beginning, like the experimental design is tricky in order to try and actually compare these virtues. We think we have an idea on the way forward, but given the fact that my co-author is the one that thought about it and I do not know how to explain it right now, I'm going to regret that I mentioned that and hope that you don't ask for follow-up information.
Other questions?
Yeah.
One for, Sarbottam. Sarbottam, you mentioned the word,
Sarbottam.
desensitization.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, my attitude, is I'm desensitized, that's part of my attitude, but it is also reflecting on my behavior. And all of those were non-significant, the ones at the bottom. What, in your study, are you finding like, these people are just saying, you know, no matter what I do, how much you train me, how careful I am, I just go into it thinking something wrong is gonna happen, no matter what I do. And we were talking about this yesterday, where like a company like 23andMe now is gonna be bought over by another company, and then all these millions of people, their DNA data is out there.
Right.
Is the attitude more like it's non-significant because they're like, I know something bad is gonna happen. I had that understanding going into it, so nobody can teach me anything about it.
You know, that is a good observation. So it all boils down to systems 1 versus systems 2 thinking, right? There's going to be a finite set of people who are going to make decisions like those, not being rational, more so than the other, right? So whenever I sign up for an email account with Google, I don't think about reading the terms and conditions, right? I just do that because either I'm in a rush, either I'm too emotional about it. Hey, I need to get it done quickly. The urgency and intensity of my need, right? So I do not think about it rationally. So that is where the theories like a rational choice theory goes out of the window, right? I don't think about it as a zero-sum game. I just think that 1, I am in a rush. Second is, I just don't care, right? And to your point, I think I just don't care could branch out into 2 different forms. One would be along the lines of, hey, I've already given so much data to Google and Meta and of the likes, right? So what more harm can I bring onto me? So I've already deemed myself defeated in this war. So that is one angle. The second is, you know, I just don't care. I'm in a rush, right? I want to sign up in my iClicker. So if the website says, accept or reject all the cookies because I want to get the attendance done, I'll just say accept. It's the intensity and urgency of need. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah,
Kind of tough question for you.
sure.
Can you pull up the model? Because I'm gonna just butcher the names of these variables.
Sure.
So prior incidents. So at first I was like, wow, that's really counterintuitive. I would think that those would all be significant. But then the more I thought about it, the less I believed that they would be significant. And so prior incidents, well, a lot of people, I think they don't necessarily like the incidents, the effects of the data breach don't happen directly after somebody gives up their information. Oftentimes it's a downstream effect. And so a lot of times people don't know where it came from, how it happened, who, what, where, when, and why. And so they're just like, oh my God, I think my mom especially was like, oh my God, 3,000 links in the past, 60 days or whatever. And so does that really influence their awareness? Well, probably not. But I think maybe prior incidents may work through the training. So if you have an incident, then your organization makes you go through training in a lot of organizations.
Right.
Or maybe you seek out training on your own. So I was thinking maybe the incidents actually works through the training. So incidents occurs, then I seek or am forced to engage in training, which then expands my awareness of kind of what's going on. So my question is, did you test that?
Yes.
Incidents going through training.
So the survey had a couple of qualifier questions, and one of them was, have you suffered a breach to the best of your knowledge? And they said yes. And 1,297 data points, observations that we have been filtered out to remove those observations, those people who did not report suffering any breach. So these are the people who reported having gone through at least one breach to the best of their memory recall. So I'm not sure if that fully negates that particular limitation. Maybe there's a better way.
So
yes.
data excludes people with no prior incidents?
Yes. So we wanted to make sure that each of these constructs were corresponding to the data sets that we had, right?
So to show an effect, we need variation in number. I wonder if you included those with no prior incidents. Because what you want to see is, you can't see the effect of prior incidents if you don't have anybody with no prior incidents.
Mhm.
Well, is that, so it's the variable, the number of prior incidents.
So there is very.
No, it's not. It's an extent.
If you exclude out the zeros, you got.
It's an extent, so like the
Mhm.
question would be like, to what extent did you have a prior incident?
So I guess I can do a better job explaining this. So at the beginning of the survey, we had this question, right? Hey, are you an internet user, right? Just to disqualify those candidates who do not like to stay online. The second one was whether or not they had suffered breach. And then if they had not suffered any breach, then it would do something in the quadrics, causing them not to answer a bunch of different other questions. Right? But that allowed us to disqualify those respondents who had not suffered any breach.
But
So
if
now-
I wanted to examine the effect of gender,
Mhm.
but my data only has males, I can't see an effect of gender.
So it's not prior incidents, it's the magnitude of
Mhm.
those incidents, correct?
Right.
So it's not a count, it's a magnitude of incidents.
So it's like the degree to which the incident was impactful on the company or the number
But
of
all
prior
I'm saying
incidents?
is
It's kind of a
included the
misnomer.
zero.
Yeah.
So I guess I should have included the definition of the construct just to avoid that confusion.
Or just-
So prior incident is the extent to which they believe that item 1, 2, 3 resonates with their prior experience of being breached, Likert scale.
I don't like it,
Yeah.
scales. There's a.
So items like I have been the victim of identity theft on
Oh,
a scale of 1 to 5.
okay, so it's, okay, so
Mhm.
so prior incident isn't about whether they've had a prior incident or not. It's more like a feeling of the effect of the prior incident. I guess I have to see the items.
Right.
On the scale.
I can show you the items. Yeah.
That's interesting. I also want to say that I love this paper so much because you got like a no non-result, like a no significance,
Mhm.
and that's the coolest thing. All right, and then they publish. There's so many like I was told when I first got on my PhD program, it's like good, we can run the experiment. If you see no significant difference, I'll go straight back to the drawing board. I was like, that's terrible. Like we should. And I have one paper right now that is based on non-significance. So I want yours to succeed and mine to succeed. So-
I hope the reviewers share your sentiments, man.
Well, you can certainly feel free to reach out to our speakers if you have additional questions, but let's give them a round of applause.